Hey guys, so just got back from the theater from seeing a special Thursday night screening of Kick-Ass 2. Um, Now I'm gonna get right into my review instead of talking about random stuff. This time I'm gonna get into my review right away because I have a lot to talk about um, with this movie, and I kind of want to not waste much time talk about other stuff. Before I do get my review, I feel like I should mention my quick thoughts on the first one, which the first one, the first Kick Ass, I freaking love. Um, I definitely think it was one of the better comic book movies in the last few years. Definitely one of the most unique comic book movies. For God's sakes, it features the movie features a little girl saying words like "cunt" and "fuckers" and every other cuss word you can think of, and at the same time, she's also cutting up bad guys into pieces, uh, and while she's doing that, the Banana Split theme song's playing in the background, and I think that should tell you what kind of humor the first one has, and what kind of movie that the first one was. I've really enjoyed it. I loved the over the top humor. I loved Hit Girl. I loved uh, Nicolas Cage. I loved everything in that movie. I liked Mark Strong as the villain. I mean, everything was really good. And so with this one, the sequel, I was looking forward to it. I thought this trailers looked really good. I even got a chance to look at the graphic novel, and after I looked at the graphic novel, I was really interested in how the hell they were going to pull this movie off. Especially some of the shit that happens in the graphic novel is really messed up, and so because of that, I'm like, how are they going to pull this off without getting NC-17? Um, and I will talk about that a little bit more in the review, but this movie, I was looking forward to it. I knew going in it was not going to probably be better than the original, and or even close to being as good as the original. But but so as long as I was entertained and as long as I had a good time, I was gonna be fine. And even though the reviews haven't been very good for this, not even close to as good as the reviews for the first one. Um, I'm still looking forward to it. And coming out of it, yes, the movie is not as good as the original. It's not even freaking close to being as good as the original. But I still like this movie. I still was really entertained. I had a lot of fun watching it. I didn't regret watching it. I laughed my ass off like I did in the first one. Not as funny as the first one, but this had a lot of good funny moments. There was a lot of faults. There was faults to this movie, but there was a lot of strong stuff in this. One of the biggest strong points of this movie was, and probably the best thing about this movie, probably the best thing about this movie, was Chloe Grace Moretz's Hit Girl. She carries this movie. She was one of the best things about the first movie, but she is definitely the best thing about this movie. Um, I've heard even a lot of reviewers that didn't like the first one or didn't like this movie gave a lot of praise to her in this movie, and it's well deserved. She's awesome. This character is really freaking awesome. And Chloe Grace Moretz does a really good job. Uh, I love the fact that they take basically the first half of this movie, a lot of it's focused on her because at the beginning of it she's still Hit Girl and still trying to fight crime, but because her adopted father, who was a friend of Nicolas Cage, the adopted father is played by Morris Chestnut. Um, he finds out that she's still being Hit Girl, and because of that, he asks her to please stop doing it and try to live a normal life, and she agrees to finally give in. And from there on, it's her trying to be a normal teenage girl. and that's pretty. To some hilarious results and even some emotional results. And it's kind of funny to watch a person like Hit Girl having a hard time handling the drama of high school, and it's kind of funny to watch, honestly. And it's in especially dealing with the Mean Girls, and she definitely gets her revenge against the Mean Girls. Some hilarious results and one of the most over the top scenes in the film, but I enjoyed her immensely in this movie. She carried the movie. She was, I mean, yeah, like I said, the highlight of this, and I like where they left her character off in this movie, and it kind of hinted that maybe they could do a spin-off movie of Hit Girl, and I know there's a spin-off comic book about Hit Girl, and I'm hoping they adapt that into film, but I don't know how, it depends on how this movie does. But I hope that happens, because it kind of left her character off in a pretty interesting place. I want to see where it goes from there. I'm not giving, not saying that the kid who played Kick-Ass wasn't good. He was good. He's good. Was just as good as he was in the first one, but he wasn't as entertaining or as good as Chloe Grace Moretz was in this movie. One of the things I did like was Jim Carrey too. Jim Carrey, I wish there was a little bit more of him in this movie, and it's kind of sad watching this because it's like you can tell he's having fun doing this, and you can tell he's enjoying himself, and and it kind of is distracting now because, well, if you don't know, he's kind of disowned this movie because of the violence in it. Even though he knew what he was getting into and he'd seen the first movie, he still has disowned the movie. He said he's not regretted making it, but he will not promote it, and I think that's kind of bullshit. I guess all that matters is the guy's paycheck, I guess. It's kind of funny that he's playing a born-again Christian in this one, in this movie, and he is a born-again Christian in real life, and that's one of the reasons why he kind of disowned this movie, which is really ironic. But I liked him in this movie. I like Jim Carrey but I've kind of lost a little bit of respect for all the crap he's been given. I also liked particularly the fat friend. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. From the first one, fat friend of Kick-Ass from the first one, who he was from The Office. He was in The Office last season, The Office, and he's been in a lot of other stuff, and he's always very funny. He's funny in this. He decides to join the superhero group that's run by Colonel Stars and Stripes, played by Jim Carrey. And in order to join the group, he comes up with a backstory that his parents were killed in an opera, like outside of an opera, and that's why he wanted to become a superhero. And then Kick-Ass, while in the group, recognizes him and kind of calls him out on his bullshit. And then he's like, "Oh shit!" Well, he kind of feels like an ass. And it's like all these other people have like stories about their sister being murdered or son being murdered and all stuff, and it makes him look like an ass. It was kind of funny. He has a lot of funny lines in this movie. I thought the humor in this movie was very funny, very good. The humor was very funny. The humor was very good in this. Not as funny as it was. This movie was not as funny as the first one, but it was still had a lot of really laughable moments. One of the particularly funnier moments was something that I think wasn't intended. I don't know. And this is something you probably will notice. It's hard to miss. Definitely watch out for this in the beginning moments of this movie. At the beginning of the movie, like, they show that Chloe Grace Moretz is trying to train Kick-Ass to become a better superhero, and she has like her own headquarters, like the training grounds. And in this training room, there's a wall, and on this wall, there's a picture frame of a picture of Nicolas Cage, who was her dad in the first one. And obviously, he's dead in this one, or he died in the first one. Spoiler alert if you don't know that. And because of that, that's fine. You have a picture of Nicolas Cage. That was her dad. That's fine. But they have the goofiest freaking picture of Nicolas Cage you could ever imagine. Imagine the goofiest look you could imagine on Nicolas Cage, and put that in a picture, and then put it in a picture frame, and then hang it on a wall, and there you go. He's like, I can't do it justice. It's hysterical. It's like, it was kind of distracting for the scene. Luckily, the scene that picture was that picture was in the background were funny scenes, because it was kind of hard. It would have been hard to take a serious scene with that in the background. It would have been really, really hard. I kind of really laughed at that. It was kind of distracting, honestly. I also like, when I said earlier, I was interested in how they were going to pull off some of the more intense moments and the more messed up moments in the comic book. I was wondering how they were going to pull them off, and I think they did them well, honestly. Particularly the Colonel Stars and Stripes death in the middle of the movie. Spoiler alert. I'm going to go to spoilers, so yeah, in the comic book, it's really graphic. It's like, if you haven't read the comic book, he gets killed, and they decapitate him, and they decapitate his dog at the same time, and then stick his dog's head on his body. And there's an image of that in the comic book. And you're like, you couldn't do that in fucking film. They don't do that. And at one point, the funny part is that they were like, well, do you want us to kill the dog? They asked the motherfucker, Christopher Mintz-Plasse, like, you want us to kill the dog? It's like, no, I'm not fucking evil. It's like, I'm not an asshole. This is being an asshole. I kind of like that line. I was like, okay, that's kind of a, like, really? That was kind of funny. And the other one that I know a lot of people were interested how they were going to deal with this was the rape scene. There was a rape scene in the comics. They don't show it in the comics, but it leaves to the imagination. You know what happens. It's with the comics. It's with Dave's girlfriend, or the girl he likes, or Kick-Ass's girlfriend, the girl he likes, and she gets raped by the motherfucker. And this one, it's kind of different. It's not her that kind of, but at the same time, they don't really. The rape doesn't happen. It almost does, but because of motherfucker's incompetence, hint, hint, it doesn't happen, and it's kind of done for laughs, which is kind of weird, but at least they kind of avoided. They didn't really need that rape scene in there. The motherfucker at this point had already done enough despicable things that, yeah, they didn't need it. He does enough more despicable things later on that, they didn't need that rape scene in there. I think that was, I think they were going a little overboard in the graphic novel, and I'm glad they changed this stuff. Because there's some stuff you can't put in film, and there's stuff you can put in graphic novel and get away from graphic novels, but there's stuff that stuff sometimes you can't get away with in film. Now let's get into the bad stuff. I felt this movie, the big problem with this movie was that it felt very rushed. It felt like a lot of stuff was missing. There was like stuff that sometimes would come out of the blue and there was no rhyme or reason, it felt, for some things that happened in this movie, especially towards the end. It just felt very rushed, and it felt like there was stuff missing. And particularly, there was one particular thing that kind of just happens, or like one storyline that goes absolutely nowhere. And I was like, well, what the hell was the point of that whole thing? And it's with the motherfucker. By the way, that's his name, so don't get pissed for me saying it. I'm just naming his character, but that's the villain in the movie. The motherfucker, he has an uncle who's in prison, and they keep mentioning about him, the uncle in prison, a lot. There's a key moment in the movie you thought was a key moment. It's supposedly the scene where you're supposed to believe that the motherfucker becomes evil when he goes to visit. It's when he goes to visit his uncle in prison, but it just kind of goes nowhere. Like I said, they mention the uncle so much in the movie that you think he's gonna have a key role in like the end of it, but he doesn't. And it's just like, what was the point of that? Really, I don't get what the point of the uncle was, and there was no point to it, and it went nowhere, and that kind of drove me nuts. It was something I didn't really think about until after I saw it, but there was a lot of stuff that felt very rushed, that it was kind of distracting towards the end, last half, and it kind of hurt the last half a little bit. Oh yeah, one thing I did like the last battle at the end of the movie, the showdown between the superheroes and the villains, and I particularly kind of liked the fight between Mother Russia, who's this gigantic hulking lady who doesn't do much. That's one of the problems. She doesn't do as much. She provides the more over the top moments. That's all she does in this movie, is provide a more over the top moments. She's basically Bridget Nielsen, but if she was given more fucking steroids and was even bigger than Bridget Nielsen. This lady is huge, and she fights Hit Girl, and Hit Girl gets her ass whooped. I mean, it's brutal, and it's very good. And like the conclusion to that fight is pretty good too. It's a little, it's absurd, but it fits the tone of the movie. Yeah, but a lot of stuff felt rushed. And I think there's a lot of stuff that got cut out or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I feel like a lot of stuff got cut out. Also, I like Christopher Mintz-Plasse. I really do. I think he's a very good comedic actor. But when you have Mark Strong as your villain in the first one, he's a very intimidating son of a bitch, and he was very good as the villain in the first one. It's kind of hard to follow that, and it's almost impossible to follow that with Christopher Mintz-Plasse or McLovin. He's always gonna be McLovin. Sorry, guy, but I like Christopher Mintz-Plasse, but he wasn't intimidating. He was played off more as incompetent, and he was more of a comedic villain, and it kind of didn't work when when you're supposed to find him despicable towards the end. And I didn't care for him as much as the villain in this, but I didn't think he was terrible, but I just didn't love him as the villain in this. Also, he doesn't even really become very good. He doesn't become intimidating really until he forms the group, and that's another thing. How the hell did the group? How this group form? The group of villains form is very rushed. It just kind of like 1 minute. He's trying to recruit. He's trying to get all these. He has all these names of people that they want to try to recruit. And next scene, they're all joined forces with him. Like they don't show him, trying to go out and recruit him. They just you're just to assume that they all said, okay, I'll join this group. Um, I don't know. It's probably nitpicking there, but yeah, I didn't care too much for him as the villain, and also the violence in this. The violence in this, I keep hearing a couple people say that the violence in this movie is really excessive, and so I heard somebody say it was really more violent than the first one. I'm like, really? Do you not remember the first one? The first one was really violent. There's a scene where the first one. There's a scene where a guy goes in the walk-in microwave and he gets blown to pieces, and like Mark Strong gets blown up by a bazooka. It's pretty fucking awesome. That scene is really awesome, but this one, the violence isn't like the first half isn't very violent. Then like it becomes the weird part is that it becomes a really like a completely different movie towards the last half, because it's like, well, we didn't have a bunch of violence in the first half, so let's just put all the violence in the last half, and it kind of feels like a completely different movie. Like, yeah, I mean, I know the first one had overtop violence, but it kind of felt weird, just didn't some of it, it felt weird that they just kind of the first half wasn't violent, that real violent, and then the second half just they throw all the violence into the second half. It's really weird. I know it sounds like I'm complaining. I've tried to list. I enjoyed this movie though. I really did, and it sounds like I'm complaining. And the movie is rushed. I do think this movie could have been a bit longer, maybe 2 hours. It's an hour and 40 minutes, I think. Something like that. It's about like an hour and 40 minutes. Maybe 20 minutes longer, and this movie would have been maybe better. A little bit better. Maybe not more it felt more rushed. But, again, I liked this movie. I didn't hate it. I was entertained. I recommend this. I do recommend this. Especially if you like the first one, I real highly recommend it. It's very entertaining, and I'm kind of glad. I'm not mad I saw it. It was a lot of fun, and honestly, I don't know how this is going to do in the theaters or how it's going to do at the box office, because for a early Thursday screening, the theater I was in was like almost empty. There was like maybe 2, 3, or 4 groups of people other than me in that theater, and it was a big theater, and I was like, oh boy, that kind of sucks. The first one, I was kind of surprised they did a sequel for this, because the first one kind of wasn't a big box office hit, but it kind of found its home on it found its niche on home video, and that's I think why they ended up making the second one. Which, if that was true, why don't they make a fucking Dread sequel? But I know I'm cussing a lot here. Oh well. But anyways, yeah, I recommend this. It's a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun watching it. It's nothing I regret watching. Next week, I'll be back next week with either Your Next or World's End. Both movies I'm really looking forward to. Probably gonna go for Your Next. I'm probably gonna watch Your Next week, and then like I have a couple catch-up weeks, so I'll probably put World's End in next week, or not. So it'll probably be Your Next or next week, and then the next week after that it's gonna be the World's End. So I'll be back probably with Your Next week, and I will talk to you guys later.